I'm Alana. My pronouns are they and she.
And I'm Jessie. My pronouns are she and her.
And
we're
we're making mentions. We'll get there.
Killed it.
Making Mentions is an organization providing radical Jewish education.
And this is the Artist Series, where we showcase queer, Jewish, anti-Zionist artists. And today we're talking to Mia Montalvo. Mia, welcome. Introduce yourself. Please correct me if I said any part of your name wrong. Pronouns, where you call home, astrological sign, if you're into that, because we are. And then tell us what kind of art you make.
Amazing. Thank you both so much for having me here. I'm such a huge fan. I'm so excited. This is such a great podcast. So to introduce myself, my name's Mia Montalvo. My pronouns are they, them. I'm a queer, Jewish, multimedia artist. I currently live in Brooklyn, New York, and I would describe myself as both a multimedia artist, but specifically a collage artist. My art, as you're seeing me talking through right now, is called playscape art. But you could also find me making zines, video diaries, film photography, all different kind of fun modalities. Really anything, I would say, that encompasses storytelling and tries to capture the human condition. Oh, and my astrological sign, I'm a Leo.
I feel like
So
many artists are either Leos or Aquarians. Your sister sign, naturally. So I love that.
Yeah.
So good to meet you. Thanks for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So we'll just jump right into kind of a big question, and feel free to answer it however feels authentic to you. How does Judaism show up in your life now, if at all?
That is definitely a good question to start with. Judaism definitely shows up in my life now. It didn't show up in my life throughout my childhood. I grew up in a very non-practicing household. My mother was Jewish. My father is a non-practicing Catholic. And they were kind of like, we're going to just let our child decide when they get older, like what feels best. But I would say that I definitely grew up with a lot more of the cultural Judaism, cultural Jewishness, as well as holidays and such. So I felt always more connected to my Jewishness than anything else. And I will say, though, I definitely took a long time to really be proud of my identity. I grew up in a more rural suburban area in New Jersey, and people think New Jersey is very Jewish, but there are parts that are not. And I didn't have very much strong representation or really anyone to a community to feel whole in. So it didn't take until I would say I was more of a teenager, growing up, starting to hear more stories about my family, about my grandparents, and stories from my mom specifically, that started to really capture what Jewishness looked like to me, and starting to understand how innate it felt to me. Specifically within my art, I would say that the storytelling aspect is number one for me. I think everyone on my mom's side of the family were storytellers. My grandfather, he was in big bands and in the 30s, and then he went on to be a radio host. He was a disc jockey, and he sang on his own show, and he was very loud and just a beautiful storyteller. He really engaged with his people that he had on his show. And then my uncle is a singer-songwriter. He creates music. My other uncle is huge into art, really. So I felt really immersed in those stories, but then also just being around my family and seeing how they brought people into worlds. I was like, this is what I understand Jewishness to be, is just this appreciation for life, and this just wanting to make people feel included and want them to understand that life is really so rich, and that we can create so much. And then I didn't find that within myself until I was a young adult and really was understanding what art looked like for me. And now I make more visual art. But I think that Jewishness now comes out in the sense of really just like having a deep appreciation and a practice for gratitude. And yeah, I think the biggest thing that I hold on to within my art is just thinking of the Sam L'chaim to life and just like trying to pull that out wherever I can and just take these moments that are really precious and try and capture experiences of wonder and joy and grief and all of those things that like might on a micro level in the way that I feel like I present them because my work is mostly through nature and animals and silly moments feels small, but I think that's one of the main things we learn in Judaism is to thank and be really thankful for the small things. So yeah, that's a long-winded answer and where my Jewishness is now, but yes.
I love that. No, I think that was so beautifully put and comprehensive. I really love the idea that Judaism is about, yeah, just like life and gratitude. Like using L'chaim as a centering point is really beautiful. I feel like that's something that I don't know that I've heard a lot of when thinking about Judaism. And I think that's really beautiful. I think, yeah, I definitely feel like it speaks to the resilience of Judaism as like a religion and Jewish people as a peoples. And so yeah, something about that is really heartwarming to me.
One thing I want to pull in real quick, I just am thinking about is I recently went to a queer Pesach celebration and it was very much rewritten and on our own terms. And my dear friend made their own Haggadah and really made it very anti-Zionist, very queer, and it was so beautiful, but it was still the prayers that you would see in a normal Passover Seder, but it was just like a room of queer people and a room of queer Jews specifically, and I like had this moment where I was like, okay, people have been doing this for generations, for not more than generations, for thousands of years. And this is our tradition. And just like what you're saying, as far as being a people, I really had that moment in that moment. And I was just like, yeah, this is where I feel this essence the strongest when you're in connection with other people and just seeing Judaism as a practice.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's super real. I just think about starting to observe Shabbat on my own as an individual person outside of my family's observance of Shabbat growing up and be like, oh, this is me literally carrying on this thousand year old tradition that so many people before me have done. And whatever way I choose to make that ritual my own is beautiful and special, but it is like a continuation that connects me to this lineage in a way that is, yeah, really cool. And I think when I think about myself growing up, I definitely didn't picture myself being like such an intensely Jewish person, I guess, in the way that I am now, where I'm like hosting Shabbats and hosting Rosh Chodeshes and like hosting Passover and like making so much of my life about Judaism. And yeah, it is really special.
I also feel the same. I don't think I ever would have pictured myself to be this aggressively Jewish or outwardly Jewish, but I agree that I think it's really beautiful to see how you can make it your own and invite people into that and remember that that's the core of it at the end of the day is just sharing connection and experience with people. And yeah, I think being able to making your own traditions and then seeing them trickle down and just see how people experience those things is really beautiful.
I just need to say aggressively Jewish will absolutely be the title of this episode. So thank you for that tidbit.
Incredible.
I was immediately like, okay, perfect, there we go. You're starting to touch on this when you're talking about being part of very specifically like queer and anti-Zionist Jewish spaces. But in relation to your art, how do you feel like your identities impact or show up in your art, whatever those identities might be?
So I would say very directly coming into Jewishness, I currently have an exhibition with an amazing organization that I work with primarily, the Lower East Side Girls Club, and they're a nonprofit offering free programming for mostly young women and youth of color, programming in arts, digital media, STEM, music, so many things. And I was fortunate to have the opportunity to create a little exhibit in their space on Governor's Island. And so the theme of our house is Memory Lab, and it's really just centering memories as a community and using those memories to see how we can imagine a beautiful, more brighter future. And so in my little space, my exhibit is called To Life and Jewish Love. And it's really, I would say, an ode to the feelings and the stories that were passed down to me. And now I find myself feeling like as the keeper of. And it's really just like a room that I wanted people to step into and to feel like that love and to feel like the kookiness of it a little bit, seeing tradition through the eyes of like objects and photographs that I've held. For example, I have a wall of photographs that are all pictures from my great grandparents who were in Brooklyn, as well as then spanning to pictures of like my mom and my aunts and pictures of me when I was younger, like in front of a menorah, and just like a cultivation of all those moments, seeing how they seep in and seep out. And yeah, I am very grateful to be able to like present that aspect of my identity in my art. But then also, I think going back to the l'chaim of it all, really centering like the presence for life, using art as a act of gratitude, really, I think I would say is a big part of my ethos, I guess, for art, is just trying to connect a lot of the silly, mundane, yet really important moments of our lives into my art. So with playscape art, for example, I created that in the sense of I wanted people to think of it as like a landscape for play, being able to connect back to your most childlike self, or just be able to slow down and have the moments that we're not really always afforded any longer, just like being in the consistent landscape that we are. So yeah, I wanted people to really just be able to come in and experience my work as a collection that feels like a place to play, a place to imagine and feel like all of those pressures are taken off. And I think that's inherently very queer as well. And just a place that feels like there is no right or wrong answer. It just is. It's very fluid and colorful and bright. And I think that that's who I've always been as a person. And being able to put that in a visual space is really special to me. And to have art be a practice of mine that can really be like a fuel for my outward identity and my inner worlds is really sweet and something I'm grateful to do.
Wow, there's so much that is so beautiful in what you've just brought together, and the picture that, no pun intended, you've painted for us of kind of the way you blend these worlds and these heavy feelings and emotions, like you were sharing, like grief and loss, with this gratitude for life and appreciation and the playfulness, the lightness of it, even when it's so heavy. And I'm curious because I've seen in a lot of your work art as resistance and resisting the heaviness, the oppression of the world. How would you explain how playfulness and joy is integral to resistance and art?
That's a great question. I think the life that we live in is innately very heavy, and I think even the landscape that we're currently in is really heavy. And so it's like my main thing is that I have to remind myself, as well as I want to remind others, that like play is so needed and it's so human, and yet like we're stripped of it. Like we're told it's not like essential, but it really is. It's really healthy, and it's really like a way for people to release so much and to be able to just laugh and explore who they want to be, explore different connections. And so I think that being able to have play, to have a practice, or even literally to just go outside and like notice things that are beautiful and blooming, or just even just like moments just to be able to be really present, I think that's like a form of resistance in itself, because we get so stuck in our routines and formed by capitalism and by what society needs us to do to survive. And I think the thing is that, especially as Jewish people or people who are people of color, for example, I think that survival is always at the forefront. We're going to white knuckle our pain and get through this, but like getting through it isn't living. So I think that it's really important to make a space for people to get silly, to play, to feel that lift off your shoulders from when you're a child and you're like, no one's judging me right now. Like, I'm just being myself. And even if you're not someone who feels like you're an artist and is wanting to do that, being able to just share pieces to have people feel inspired is really important. I think like I look at so many people's art on a daily on Instagram, and I'm sharing it consistently with my friends and sharing it with people I love because I'm like, they would appreciate this. This would make their day a little lighter. And so I think that's my intention as well, in the sense of resistance, is that I want my art to bring some kind of feeling to someone that they needed. If it brings something to you that you're like, oh, I felt that before, or just, oh, that's beautiful. I know that feeling of being outside and like looking up at the sky and being like, wow, we're really here and we're looking at the moon right now. The moon is crazy. The moon is beautiful. That's like exactly what I want to do. And also I would say that's an alternative form of resistance too. I wouldn't say that's what you would think when you'd hear resistance, because I think that there's people who are on the ground and marching in the street or being primarily information based in their art. But I think that it's all really equally important to have as resources
Yeah,
for.
like we can't do the marching in the street and the information sharing if we're not also allowing ourselves to feel joy and participate in play. So I think that's just really essential to
Yeah.
acknowledge. And I think, yeah, everything you're saying is completely spot on. I think that acknowledging the little things and participating in joy and play are things that we're not encouraged to do under capitalism. And that we're especially like the more and more marginalized identities that you walk through the world in, the less you're encouraged to participate in play, or the less able you are because of your safety. And so I think that makes it even more an act of resistance to simply do something that other people don't want you to do, or yeah, just to live and be alive when other people don't want you to live and be alive is
Yeah.
resistance. Yeah, I've been feeling super emotional around pride stuff this month, and I haven't been able to identify exactly why. And I feel like so much of it is wrapped up in that, just like seeing fellow queer and trans folks just living, but like more than that, living with joy and like being playful and happy and being able to express themselves so fully. And yeah, that feels emotional because that is an act of resistance, just our existence and our ability to exist in a way that like is on display for the world to see is resistance when there are people who are trying to shut that down. And yeah, I
Yeah.
love that. I think that's really important.
Yeah. No, I agree wholeheartedly with that. And I feel like I've also been in a very similar headspace around all of this. I think it's been a weird year for Pride. I mean, not even weird is such a light way to put it, but an intense last year that I think it's hard to really like understand everything that's going on and fully grasp the weight of it all, but then also being able to like find some space and just observe other people being free and joyous in these spaces is really healing. So I agree with you. It's one
Yes.
light
No,
throughout all of it.
seriously. We know that specifically you work with a lot of collage and multimedia art, like you mentioned earlier. What do you feel like collage and multimedia art specifically teach you about yourself, and how do those forms help you get in touch with your joy?
So I would say collaging is something I've done since I was a kid. I loved cutting up magazines. My best friend and I would be in my basement and just be doing little vision boards, though we didn't know were vision boards, like when we were like 8 years old. And I always just found it seemed such a non-traditional way to do art. And I grew up obviously very closeted queer in the sense as well, in just being not good at sports, very socially anxious, all of those things, and finding art like being a little sanctuary for me, but learning art in a very traditional way and the visual sense And I think that when I started to explore collage, I realized how funky and expressive it could be and how much you can truly make with collage. It's always changing. And I think that I started, I would say, seriously doing collages as a New Year practice, making myself a really large vision board, and seeing how intense I would get with it and how much joy it brought me when I saw it when I was done. And I was like, wow, I need to display this so I can see what's ahead for the year. And then I was like, I don't have to do this as just a thing for my life. I can do this just as feelings that are passing. So I feel like collage in a lot of ways can be almost like a form of journaling, or it can be just, like I've said, a form of play in the sense of just opening up a magazine and being like, oh, I like these colors and I like these shapes, and really just playing around, mixing and matching, or creating little scenes. Like I love mixing little animals and such and just trying to create some little world out of it. But yeah, I think that collage can be a really expressive tool for art. And it's also definitely really helped me process a lot of grief and depression. And it's something that I can pull aside, I think, from my normal life, come home and be like, oh, I'm just gonna sit down and collage. It's like, it's relaxing, it's nice. And then at the same time, I'm like, oh, and it's my art. It's sweet to see as it builds and the consistent play of it all.
I love that. You brought me right back to sitting on the floor with my sister, cutting up 17 magazine and Ranger Rick and whatever else was around our house and just putting it everywhere. And you're making me think that you just said the term a lot, but collage is a lot. It's a lot of layers. And for those of us that are told like we're a lot, it's validating to put a lot on a space, on a canvas, on a piece of art and be like, this is everything. This is not too much. This is a lot in all the best ways. So you got me with that one.
But I love that you said that because my brain's popping in that alone. I'm just like, yeah, it's like maximalist art to the reins. You know what I mean? It's not what people or what traditional art would see as, oh yeah, this is art. No, like it's a lot. It's a lot of, and I think that that's viewed in so many different lights of how people express themselves. So I
I
appreciate you saying that.
collaged for the first time probably since I was a kid recently, and it was so much fun. Like everything that you're saying is so spot on. I was like, oh, I need to start doing this. Like I feel like especially because I'm someone who has a really I don't think I'm not gonna say I'm not a good artist, but I don't draw, I don't paint, I don't think I'm traditionally good at those things. And I feel like I'm very like a perfectionist. So it was nice to be able to just be like, oh, I can put whatever I want on here and it literally doesn't matter. It can look like anything. It's a collage. It'll be good if it feels good to me and if it felt good to make. And that was just like, yeah, it was really nice. It was a really fun way to get in touch with my inner child.
And it's very freeing to also be like,
yeah,
this doesn't matter. This is beautiful. I like it. It looks good to me and I had fun making it.
Yeah.
So like, cool. Yeah. And I also just bringing back to the capitalism aspect of that, I think it's really hard as well. Like being someone who likes art or creates art in any sense to get to that precipice to be like, am I making art for people or am I making art for myself? Am I making art to sell? Like it's really difficult because society tells you you should be selling this or you should be sharing this at all points. And that's just really not healthy. It's not healthy. It's not accessible for people. And it just gets us into that mindset that everything we need to make is for product and it's not continuously taking us away from ourselves.
And I want to bring it back to what you said about collage and helping processing depression and processing these really darker parts of ourselves and thinking about that in contrast to the commodification of art and the selling of it and trying to market it. And I'm curious how you feel the relationship between joy and play and art during these difficult times, which we've talked about, pandemic and the world seeming like it's ending all the time, how they play out and why it matters to keep joy and play relevant in art when it's so easy to write just like an ode to the end of the world. And I'm thinking maybe there's a connection here to Jewish history or values or ethics, because I had a great professor once say to me, yeah, you guys all think the world is ending, but Jews have always thought the world was ending every single time. Just curious, any thoughts on any of those questions generally?
So many thoughts. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah, I think first thing you were saying about Jews have always thought the world is ending, or it's like kind of the running joke about, oh, here's another holiday of like how they didn't kill us. And I would say we're very in the past in a lot of ways. We're always making sure that that is known and we are aware of it. But at the same time, we're always around the table with wine and being like, let's be thankful for why we're here and let's be joyous in this moment for the people around us and the traditions that we continue to freely express. And so I think that it's really hard not to get stuck when everything is so bad. And trust me, I have. But I think that having the reminders that there are things that can really anchor us and just being able to see the good, like I said, like seeing things on Instagram, seeing things from other artists where I see reminders from nature or how easy it is to just get caught up and sing and dance and be with your friends. And I think it's really, once again, it's so important to make art that is happy, because if we get stuck in so much of the doomsday, this is the end of the world, that's all we're thinking of. And there is no possibility for the future. There is no seeing beyond that. So yeah, I think it's very important to try and anchor yourself in the things that are good. And I think when I've been struggling, the things I've always gone back to is just like how grateful I am to hear the birds chirping on my street, or just be like, wow, the trees are so green. Just little things that really, or just being like, wow, I just had a really nice conversation with my friend and we just laughed our asses off. Things like that, that feel so small, but are the essence of life. And I don't think everyone feels that way, but I do think that it's a huge thing for me. And it is probably the thing that really does keep me going in a lot of ways.
Yes, that's so huge. Started doing a gratitude list every day, like 3 things every day. And I started doing that probably well over a year and a half ago now. And it is just like small things every day. It's my partner who I love brought me coffee today, and that was really sweet. Or
Yeah.
it was the perfect temperature outside and the breeze felt really good. And yeah, the bird chirping thing is so real. I'm thinking of a story that my partner tells a lot about one of their professors in divinity school, talking about like listening to the birds as a very spiritual practice, almost like tuning into that. And we we have to do those things to keep ourselves going, especially when we are walking through the world with pain from our identities. And when we do work that is really hard, we have to be able to ground ourselves in the joy and the gratitude in the little things, because it would simply be too much if we didn't.
Yeah. One of the things that I think I go back to a lot is talking about grief and such. I grew up experiencing my mother, who had been sick for a really like a large chunk of my life, and seeing like her perspective on life, about seeing someone who's in a lot of physical pain. And I think like having the understanding of the way that your life could have went if you weren't ailed with a certain thing, with an illness, can be really hard for people to process and have to try and make the best out of. But I always saw my mom trying to make the best out of an experience, or try to make it like the most grand that it could be for me, which was very sweet. And like also just for our experiences together, because I think obviously she didn't know how long she was going to have, but she knew that this life of hers was going to be shortened. The life that I do have, I want to make sure that it's grand and it's rich and it's something that's going to be remembered to the people who are with me. And I think of my uncle, who I mentioned earlier, that I say my family, they're such great storytellers. They really bring you in when you're sitting around like a dinner table. He'll always say to me, he'll always say that she had said, how could I be upset? Of course I'm upset, but how could I be upset? I've had such a great life. Like, I've gotten to have my daughter, I've gotten to experience the things that I wanted in life. Sure, there were things that didn't turn out the way I wanted them to, but there's so much that I could be grateful for. And my uncle was just perplexed by it. He was like, wow. Didn't say this to her, but said to me, just it's incredible to see how someone could be grateful when they're in that predicament and you feel like from the outside that their life has really been just shortened. But it's so unfair. And yeah, being able to stay in the presence of the things that are good really, I think, really did make the life that she had here one that was special for her and for me. Yeah. So I always have that as an underlying feeling and just like a guiding
Wow,
force.
thank you so much for sharing that with us, Mia. That is so powerful. Talking about
Yeah.
the lineage of powerful storytellers in your family, your vulnerability and your willingness to share is truly a gift to us. So thank you so much. And I may be
Yeah.
just repetitive at this point because you might have just left us with it, but if you could leave our listeners with one message, what would it be?
Oh, I would say life is really short, but you need to get out there and really spend it with people who love you and who embrace you for everything that you are, regardless of how large it is and how crazy and silly it is. That is, I think, the most important thing. And just being able to really appreciate everything that you can have in each and every day, because there's magic in all of it, and we just have to open our eyes to see it.
Literally could not get over how perfect this session has been on the summer
Oh,
solstice of all
oh my
time,
God. It feels like it.
too.
Yes, exactly. Oh, I'm so happy. Like I found myself going into the anxiety of, is this turning into a therapy session? But I also think that it was just perfect for the vibes of Cancer
Yes.
season for going
No,
into summer solstice.
literally, yeah. This was just, I can't get over it. You were speaking at the end, and I was like, God, this has been like almost like we did this on purpose, but I promise we didn't. It just happened to be so perfect. And I hope that if you're listening to this, you can take some of the beautiful wisdom that Mia imparted with you into this new season and the month of Tammuz and Cancer season. And yes, loving these comments. Magic is everywhere, and we do just have to open our eyes to see it. So, yeah, thank you, thank you, thank you. It's been wonderful talking with you. I obviously want to highlight work you highlighted earlier that I want to swing back around to, that Mia currently has an exhibit on Governor's Island with the Lower East Side Girls Club. It's titled To Life and Jewish Love. It talks about memory, ancestry, and all that being passed down through Jewish families. So y'all should go check that out. Do you have any other work that you want to highlight besides that?
I would just say if y'all want to follow me on Playscape Art, that would be great. I am trying, as we mentioned, to say, I'm trying to get into a better practice of sharing my art despite stepping away from the pressure of needing to share it. But if y'all want to follow and see some fun little joyous magical collages, that would be
Yes.
lovely.
Thank you so much. We'll be back next week, but this time on Tuesday, with Aviva La Viv, who is a Jewish and queer singer, songwriter, and multidisciplinary artist, also based in Brooklyn. I promise we have people who are not in New York, but New York just has so many incredible queer Jewish anti-Zionist artists that we want to focus on. So we'll be back next week with Aviva. And in the meantime, we hope you really enjoyed listening to this wonderful episode with Mia, and check out their art either on Governor's Island or their Instagram. Thank you.